They said it was just $5,000. But when you're running a security platform for a national bank, $5,000 can be the firewall between safety and a multi-million-dollar meltdown. She thought I wouldn't notice. She thought I'd stay quiet. What she didn't know, I built the system she depended on, and I knew exactly how to let it fail. The morning started like any other at Carradine Capital's Denver headquarters. The familiar hum of the HVAC system, the scent of expensive coffee wafting from the executive floor, and the soft blue glow of monitors illuminating my workspace in the cybersecurity department. I'm Julia Brennan, 39 lead security architect, and for nearly 11 years, I've been the silent guardian of this financial institution's digital fortress. My colleagues often joke that I care more about our security infrastructure than my own apartment. They're not wrong. I can tell you the exact timestamp of every patch update we've implemented in the past decade, but I couldn't tell you what color my kitchen walls are without checking a photo. It's not that I lack a personal life, it's that protecting billions in assets becomes a part of your DNA after a while. I was midway through my first coffee when the email arrived. Subject: Budget Adjustment Notice, Cybersecurity Operations. I frowned. Budget adjustments weren't scheduled until next quarter. My department operated on a meticulously planned annual cycle. Unexpected changes were rare and never good news. The email was brief, corporate, and brutal. This notification confirms a $5,000 reduction in operational budget for fraud detection and prevention tools. Effective immediately. Please adjust your systems and reporting accordingly. This decision is final and has been approved by the Executive Committee. The sender was Vanessa Pike, recently promoted Director of Payments Division. I nearly spat out my coffee. $5,000 might sound trivial in a corporation that moves billions daily. But in my world, it was the difference between security and vulnerability. I knew exactly what system would be affected: our first-tier anomaly detection tool that caught low-level transaction irregularities. It wasn't the most sophisticated piece of our security infrastructure, but it was our canary in the coal mine. The early warning system that fed data to our more complex defense layers. I immediately picked up the phone and dialed Vanessa's extension. Payments Division, Vanessa Pike speaking. Her voice was crisp, professional, and completely devoid of human warmth. Vanessa, it's Julia Brennan from Security. I just received a budget cut notification that's going to create serious vulnerabilities in our fraud detection system. There was a brief pause. Yes, Julia. The Executive Committee has approved a series of optimizations across all departments. Your operation costs are excessive compared to industry benchmarks. My blood pressure ticked upward. Those excessive costs are what kept us off the list of banks that made headlines for security breaches last year. The $5,000 you're cutting maintains our first-tier anomaly detection, which overlaps significantly with our other security measures, she countered smoothly. The ROI analysis doesn't justify the redundancy. My grip tightened on the phone. It's not redundant, it's the first layer of a multi-layered system. Each component serves a specific function. The decision is final, Julia. Her tone carried the smug satisfaction of someone who'd just won a point in a game only she knew we were playing. I suggest you focus on adapting rather than resisting necessary changes. We all need to be team players in this economic climate. Before I could respond, she added, I have another call waiting. Please implement the changes by end of day. The line went dead. I sat back in my chair, seething. This wasn't about optimization. Vanessa Pike had a reputation in the company. She was a climber, the type who built her success on others' sacrifices. In her 3 years at Carradine, she'd moved up rapidly by finding efficiencies that always seemed to make her look good while undermining other departments. Now she'd set her sights on my territory. I spent the rest of the morning documenting exactly what this budget cut would mean for our security posture. I created detailed flowcharts showing how the first-tier detection system fed into our broader security architecture. I compiled incident reports from the past year, highlighting the 23 potential fraud attempts caught by this very system before they could escalate. By lunchtime, I had a comprehensive 7-page report that any reasonable executive would find compelling. I attached it to an email addressed to Vanessa, copying Richard Glenmore, our CEO, and sent it with a respectful but firm request to reconsider. I didn't even have time to grab lunch before Vanessa's response arrived. While I appreciate your thoroughness, the decision stands. Please note that all department heads have been asked to contribute to cost-saving measures, and security is not exempt. Your system architecture decisions, while technically sound, must also align with financial realities. The redundancies you've built in are luxuries we can no longer justify. Richard hadn't responded at all. Of course not, he was probably in meetings all day and wouldn't read this exchange until much later, if ever. By then, the changes would be implemented, and raising the issue would make me look like I was resistant to company directives. I sat at my desk, untouched salad beside me, contemplating my options. In my 11 years at Carradine, I'd never felt so disrespected professionally. My expertise was being dismissed as excessive caution, my carefully designed systems labeled as redundant luxuries. Fine, if that's how they wanted to play it, I would let events speak for themselves. I drafted a final email to Vanessa. I've implemented the budget adjustments as directed. The first-tier anomaly detection system will go offline at midnight. For the record, I strongly advise against this action and have documented my professional recommendation to maintain this security layer. Please confirm receipt of this notice. Her reply came within minutes. Confirmation received. Please focus your energies on optimizing the remaining systems rather than documenting objections. Your cooperation is appreciated. I printed both emails and placed them in a folder labeled System Modifications, June 2025. Then I made the necessary changes to our security configuration, setting the first-tier system to deactivate at midnight as instructed. Before leaving that evening, I sent one more email, this one to my own personal account. It contained no confidential information, just a timestamp and a simple sentence. First-tier anomaly detection disabled per management directive, June 20th, 2025, 23:59:59. It wasn't insurance, it was a marker for what I knew would eventually come. The first week without our frontline defense was unnervingly quiet. No major alerts, no significant anomalies in the transaction streams. If I didn't know better, I might have started to wonder if Vanessa had been right. But I did know better. Insecurity. Quiet periods aren't reassuring, they're the calm before the storm. On day 8, I was at my favorite sandwich shop across from our building when my phone buzzed with a mid-level alert. I quickly opened my laptop and connected to our secure network. The alert wasn't from our disabled first-tier system, it was from our second layer, which meant whatever triggered it had already bypassed what would have been our initial detection barrier. The system flagged a series of transactions that followed an unusual pattern, nothing explicitly wrong. But the velocity and distribution weren't matching standard customer behavior profiles. I immediately documented the alert and forwarded it to Vanessa's department with a priority flag, along with a note explaining that this type of anomaly would typically have been caught earlier by our now disabled first-tier system. Her response came while I was walking back to the office. Noted. Our analysis suggests this is a false positive. The transactions have been approved through normal channels and verified against existing customer patterns. Please adjust your alert thresholds to reduce unnecessary escalations. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, earning annoyed glances from other pedestrians as they moved around me. Adjust my alert thresholds. That would be like turning down the sensitivity of a smoke detector because it sometimes goes off when you're cooking. Back at my desk, I ran a deeper analysis on the flagged transactions. They weren't catastrophically suspicious, but they were definitely unusual. A corporate account that typically made predictable monthly payments was suddenly making multiple smaller transfers to new recipients. Not necessarily fraud, but exactly the kind of change in behavior that warranted investigation. I documented my findings and sent them to Vanessa again, copying her direct supervisor this time. Within an hour, I received a meeting request. The subject line read, Security Protocol Review, and the location was Vanessa's office, not a conference room, not a neutral space, her territory. When I arrived, Vanessa wasn't alone. Her assistant, A young man whose name I couldn't recall sat in the corner taking notes. A power play ensuring there was a witness aligned with her interests. Julia, thank you for coming. Vanessa gestured to the chair across from her desk. I wanted to discuss your repeated escalations of what our risk team has determined to be normal transaction patterns. I sat down, keeping my expression neutral. The patterns triggered our second-tier alerts. That's not my determination. It's the system working as designed. Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. Yes, and systems can be overly cautious. That's why human judgment is essential in these situations. Our risk analysts have cleared these transactions. Without the context that would have been provided by our first-tier system, I pointed out, Julia, her tone became condescending. I understand you're protective of your systems. It's admirable. But part of leadership is adapting to change and trusting other departments to do their jobs. She slid a document across the desk. I've taken the liberty of updating your system access protocols. Going forward, all security alerts will be routed through my department's risk assessment team before any action is taken. I glanced at the paper. It was effectively demoting me from decision-maker to advisor on my own systems. Any security concerns I raised would now need Vanessa's department's approval before being actioned. This creates an unnecessary bureaucratic layer that will slow response times to potential threats, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. It creates necessary oversight to prevent false alarms and resource waste, she countered. The document has already been approved by HR and IT governance. Your signature is a courtesy, not a requirement. In that moment, I understood exactly what was happening. Vanessa wasn't just cutting my budget, she was systematically dismantling my authority. This wasn't about $5,000. This was about control. About positioning herself as the true guardian of the company's interests while painting me as an overcautious relic resistant to change. I could fight it, escalate to Richard or the board, but Vanessa had clearly been laying groundwork for this move, securing approvals and building a narrative that cast her as the rational optimizer and me as the problem. So I signed the document. Thank you for your cooperation, Vanessa said, taking back the paper with a satisfied smile. I'm sure this new arrangement will be more efficient for everyone. As I left her office, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about my pride or position anymore, it was about the security of the entire institution. If Vanessa wanted to sideline me and dismantle the systems I'd built, she would have to own the consequences. I wouldn't sabotage anything that would be unethical and potentially illegal. But I also wouldn't go above and beyond to compensate for the gaps her optimizations had created. I would follow the new protocols exactly as written, document everything meticulously, and wait. Because in cybersecurity, it's never a question of if something will go wrong, only when. That evening, I called an old colleague and mentor, Miles Thatcher. Miles had been Carradine's chief security advisor before retiring 3 years ago. He'd been the one who hired me, who trusted my vision for building our multi-layered security infrastructure. We met at a quiet bar several blocks from the office. Miles looked good in retirement, less tense. The permanent furrow between his eyebrows finally smoothed out. So they're dismantling your system, he said after I explained the situation. It wasn't a question. Piece by piece, I confirmed, starting with the first-tier detection. Miles sipped his whiskey thoughtfully. Vanessa Pike, I interviewed her when she first joined. Sharp, ambitious, but with a dangerous blind spot for technical details she considers beneath her expertise. She's convinced the first-tier system is redundant. Called it a luxury. He snorted. A luxury, like seatbelts in a car, I suppose. Exactly. I leaned forward. Miles, I need your help. Not to fight this, I think that ship has sailed, but to document exactly what's happening and what it means for our security posture. You're building a paper trail. His eyes narrowed slightly. You think something's going to happen. I know something's going to happen. The question is how bad it will be when it does. Miles was silent for a long moment, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. What do you need from me? An independent security assessment, If I highlight these vulnerabilities, I'm just being difficult. If you do it as an external consultant with your reputation, people might actually listen. And if they don't, I met his gaze steadily. Then when things go sideways, there will be no question about who ignored the warnings. Miles nodded slowly. Send me the documentation. I'll put together an analysis. But, Julia, he hesitated. Be careful. Making enemies of people like Vanessa Pike can have consequences beyond work politics. I'm not making her my enemy, I said, finishing my drink. I'm just not saving her from herself anymore. Over the next 2 weeks, I did exactly as the new protocols dictated. When alerts came in, I forwarded them to Vanessa's risk team. When they dismissed concerns, I acknowledged their decisions without argument. I documented everything, every alert, every response, every dismissed warning. Miles delivered his security assessment, a comprehensive 30-page report detailing exactly how our modified security architecture created vulnerabilities. I submitted it through official channels, copying all relevant executives, including Richard. The response was a formal acknowledgement and a note that it would be considered in future security planning. Meanwhile, the anomalous transactions continued. Small irregularities, nothing dramatic, but a clear pattern was emerging to anyone who knew what to look for. Someone was testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses with increasing boldness. Each time, I reported, each time, Vanessa's team dismissed the concerns. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. I was in a routine security briefing with my team when one of my analysts, Theo, interrupted with an urgent message. Julia, we've got a high-priority alert from the third-tier system. A transaction batch just bypassed both preliminary verification layers. My heart rate kicked up, but I kept my expression calm. Details: corporate transfer, domestic wire division, $3.8 million to a new vendor account. The pattern triggered our highest risk flags, but it's already been authorized by payments. Of course it had. Without the first-tier system to catch it early, and with Vanessa's team now controlling the second-tier response, the transaction had sailed through until hitting our last line of defense, which could flag but not stop an already approved transfer. Log everything, I instructed Theo. I'll notify payments immediately. I called Vanessa's direct line. No answer. I sent an urgent email, then followed up with a text message. Critical security alert on 3.8 artwork transfer just processed through your department. Immediate investigation required. Possible fraudulent activity. 15 minutes passed, no response. I escalated, sending the alert to Richard's office with a request for immediate intervention. His assistant assured me he would be notified as soon as he finished his current meeting. By then, it was too late. The transfer had been completed. $3.8 million sent to what appeared to be a new vendor account, but was actually the first step in a sophisticated money laundering operation. From there, the funds would be split, converted to cryptocurrency, and become effectively untraceable within hours. When Vanessa finally called back, her voice had lost all its smugness. What do you mean, fraudulent? My team approved that vendor last week. They submitted all the required documentation. Documentation that would have been flagged as suspicious by our first-tier system, I said, keeping my voice steady. The one you cut from the budget because it was redundant. Silence on the line. Then, we need to meet, now, Richard's office. Richard Glenmore's corner office occupied prime real estate on the top floor of our building, with views of the Rocky Mountains that most executives would kill for. Today, nobody was admiring the scenery. Richard sat behind his massive desk, face set in grim lines. Vanessa sat rigidly in one of the visitor chairs, her usual confident posture replaced by tense alertness. The company's chief financial officer and head of legal completed our little crisis gathering. Walk me through exactly what's happened, Richard said, addressing the room but looking at me. I laid out the facts chronologically and without emotion. The budget cut to the first-tier system. The protocol changes that routed all security alerts through Vanessa's department, the series of anomalous transactions that had been dismissed over the past weeks, and finally, Today's massive fraudulent transfer that had successfully exploited the gaps in our defenses. The money is gone, I concluded. Once it hit that external account, it was immediately distributed across multiple cryptocurrency wallets. Our recovery options are extremely limited. Richard turned to Vanessa. And your department approved this vendor and this transaction? She swallowed visibly. Yes, but their documentation appeared legitimate. They presented as a new payment processor for our Western region retail clients. Documentation that our first-tier anomaly detection would have flagged. I interjected. It would have identified the discrepancies in their registration information and holding patterns before they ever reached human review. Vanessa's face flushed. You can't know that for certain. Without a word. I opened my laptop and pulled up Miles's security assessment, turning the screen so everyone could see the relevant section. There, highlighted in yellow, was a scenario almost identical to what had just occurred, a sophisticated social engineering attack that exploited the gap created by disabling our first-tier detection. This independent security assessment was submitted 3 weeks ago, I said quietly. It specifically warned about this exact vulnerability. The head of legal leaned forward. Who conducted this assessment? Miles Thatcher, I replied. Former chief security advisor for Carradine. He's widely respected in the industry. Richard's expression darkened further. I don't recall seeing this report. It was submitted through proper channels, I said. I have the delivery confirmation. I pulled up the email trail, showing how the report had been received, acknowledged, and effectively buried. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Not only had we lost $3.8 million, but we had been explicitly warned about the vulnerability and had ignored the warning. This is... Richard struggled to find words. This is completely unacceptable. The board will have to be notified. The regulators may need to be involved. With all due respect, Vanessa cut in, her voice strained but still fighting. This seems like an orchestrated attempt to undermine my department. Julia clearly has an issue with the budget adjustments. Enough. Richard's voice cut through the room like a blade. Vanessa, you dismantled a critical security system against expert advice, then created a bureaucratic structure that prevented our security team from addressing threats. This isn't about budgets or department politics. This is about fundamental risk management failures. He turned to me. Julia, what do we need to do right now to secure our systems and prevent any further breaches? Immediately restore the first-tier detection system. Revert the security protocols to allow my team direct intervention authority. Conduct a full audit of all transactions processed in the past month. I had these recommendations ready. I'd been preparing them since the day Vanessa cut my budget. Richard nodded. Make it happen. Whatever resources you need. To Vanessa, he said. We'll discuss your position at this company in a separate conversation. For now, I need you to provide complete access to all vendor approvals processed by your team in the last quarter. The meeting concluded with clear action items and a palpable sense of shock still lingering in the air. As we filed out of Richard's office, Vanessa caught up to me in the hallway. You planned this, she hissed, quiet enough that only I could hear. You let this happen to make me look bad. I stopped and turned to face her. I didn't let anything happen. Vanessa? I followed your protocols to the letter. I submitted every concern through your approved channels. I brought in an independent expert to validate my warnings. You chose to ignore all of it. Her eyes narrowed. This isn't over. Actually, I think it is. I kept my voice calm. The logs don't lie. Every decision, every dismissed warning, every protocol change, it's all documented. If you want to make this a bigger issue than it already is, I'm happy to let the evidence speak for itself. I left her standing there, her carefully constructed professional facade finally cracking to reveal the desperation beneath. The fallout was swift and comprehensive. By the end of the week, Vanessa Pike was no longer employed at Carradine Capital. The official story was that she had decided to pursue other opportunities. But everyone knew the truth. Richard called me into his office the following Monday. The atmosphere was markedly different from our crisis meetings, still serious, but with the immediate danger now contained. Julia, I owe you an apology, he began, which wasn't what I had expected to hear. I should have paid closer attention to the security concerns you raised. Thank you, I said simply. There was no need to twist the knife. We've reviewed your original security architecture and Miles Thatcher's assessment. He slid a folder across his desk. The board has approved a comprehensive security enhancement plan based on your recommendations, with a budget increase of 20%. I opened the folder. The proposed budget was beyond even what I would have requested, a clear acknowledgement of how badly they had miscalculated. There's something else. Richard leaned back in his chair. We're creating a new position, Chief Security Officer, reporting directly to me. The role would give you complete authority over all security protocols across departments. I want you to take it. The offer took me by surprise. That's a significant promotion. It's a necessary one. This incident made it clear that security cannot be subordinate to departmental politics. We need someone with both the expertise and the authority to maintain our defenses, regardless of internal pressures. The salary figure attached to the offer was substantial, nearly double my current compensation. But more important was the authority. No more Vanessa Pikes undermining critical systems for short-term gain. I'll need complete transparency, I said. Access to all executive decisions that might impact security architecture. You'll have a seat at the executive committee, Richard confirmed. Full voting rights on strategic initiatives. And Miles Thatcher? What about him? I want him on retainer as an independent security auditor, reporting directly to the board, not to me or any executive. A truly independent voice. Richard considered this, then nodded. That can be arranged. We finalized the details over the next hour. By the time I left his office, I had secured not just a promotion, but a fundamental restructuring of how security would operate within Carradine Capital. The $3.8 million loss was significant, but not catastrophic for an institution of our size. Our insurance would cover most of it, and Richard had made it clear that recovering the money was less important than preventing future breaches. The story was kept strictly internal. No press releases, no public acknowledgement of the incident. In the financial world, perception of security was almost as important as security itself. 3 months later, I sat in my favorite coffee shop across from our building, reviewing the quarterly security report on my laptop. Our enhanced systems had identified and prevented 17 potential fraud attempts since the incident, including 3 that would have bypassed our old architecture entirely. The first-tier anomaly detection system that Vanessa had dismissed as redundant had been not just restored, but expanded, now serving as the cornerstone of our defense strategy. My phone buzzed with a news alert. I opened it to find a financial industry analysis piece discussing a troubling pattern of sophisticated attacks targeting mid-sized financial institutions. Carradine wasn't mentioned. Our incident remained confidential, but reading between the lines, it was clear that other banks had suffered similar breaches with less fortunate outcomes. One passage caught my eye. Industry experts note that institutions with layered security architectures have proven remarkably resilient against these new attack vectors. The difference between vulnerability and security often comes down to seemingly minor investments in preliminary detection systems. I smiled slightly as I closed the article. $5,000. That's what Vanessa had been willing to sacrifice our security for, a rounding error in our corporate budget that had nearly cost us millions. The new Chief Security Officer office on the executive floor had a view almost as good as Richard's. My name was on the door. My budget was secure. And most importantly, my systems were functioning exactly as designed. The irony wasn't lost on me. Vanessa's attempt to diminish my department had instead elevated me to her level. While she was now rumored to be struggling to find comparable employment elsewhere, I took a sip of my coffee and opened my email to find a message from Miles. He'd completed his first independent audit under the new structure and was pleased with the results. His final comment made me laugh out loud in the quiet cafe. Isn't it remarkable how often the most expensive security failures begin with someone trying to save a few dollars? Congratulations on your promotion. It's rare that wisdom prevails over politics in corporate America. They're lucky to have you. Lucky indeed. They would never know how close we'd come to a truly catastrophic breach, one that could have cost not just millions, but the entire institution's reputation. All because someone thought they could cut corners on security to make their own numbers look better. I closed my laptop and gathered my things. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new attempts to breach our defenses. But for now, the systems were secure, the money was flowing safely, and I had finally been given the authority to do my job properly. Sometimes, I reflected as I walked back toward the Carradine building, gleaming in the Colorado sunshine. You have to let people experience the consequences of their decisions before they understand the value of what they've dismissed. Vanessa had learned that lesson the hard way. $5,000 had cost her everything: her job, her reputation, her career trajectory. For me, it had been the most expensive budget cut that eventually paid for itself many times over. As I swiped my new executive access card at the building entrance, I couldn't help but smile. In cybersecurity, vindication rarely comes so clearly or so completely.